Do you want to have Sun Titan in your command zone? And have Sun Titan instead be 3 mana and a bat and have cool bat synergies and then cool counter synergies and just be really sweet? Well, Zoraline is the commander for you. This card looks so much fun. It's an auto include in my tie-in deck, and I might just build it itself because there are some really sweet synergies, especially with the counter stuff. So the finality counter is definitely a downside. When you reanimate something, it enters a finality counter, which means if it dies, it's exiled instead, so you can't reanimate it again. However, there's a lot of ways that you can manipulate that counter by either getting rid of it or maybe moving it to an opponent's creature. Seems pretty good. Plus, you gain life whenever a bat attacks. There's a lot of ways you can get a lot of life gain in a single turn by attacking with a bunch of bats. And there's a lot of cool life gain synergies you can throw into this deck. There's a lot of ways you can take this commander, and I love it. We're going to start off though by talking about ways to manipulate those counters, because that's the biggest drawback to the commander. If you have a way to get rid of that downside, or even make it an upside, becomes very, very strong. I think the best card in this deck is just going to be Nesting Ground. You can remove a counter from a permanent you control and put it on another target permanent. So you can take that finality counter off of one of your things and put it on one of your opponent's permanents. I love that. That seems amazing. This card is nuts. You can also use cards like Feign the Broker to turn counters into treasures. Power Conduit can turn those counters into +1/+1 counters. Scholar of New Horizons can turn those counters into ramp. And Sanctuary Warden can turn those counters into card draw. There's Sun Cleanser, Pharopede, Thrall Parasite, and Hex Parasite as additional ways to just continuously remove counters. And you can toss in Solemnity, so that way you just don't get counters to begin with. The whole point of this deck is going to be replaying a lot of things from your graveyard, so that way you can get as much value as possible. So you're going to need ways to fill your graveyard. Some self-mill cards seem like a great way to do this. Mesmeric Orb is my favorite self-mill card. It just mills very efficiently. Golgari Thug and Stinkweed Imp both have Dredge, which is pretty nice. Doom Whisperer, you can just pay life to surveil, and if you are gaining a lot of life with Zoraline, then you have life to spare. Stitcher Supplier is a good way to mill your library, plus you can bring it back with Zoraline. Ripples of Undeath is one of my favorite cards from Modern Horizons 3. I think this card's extremely underrated. Lets you mill 3 cards, and if you mill something you didn't want to mill, you can pay 1 mana and 3 life to get it back. Out of the Tombs can mill you very quickly. Milliken can mill you as it ramps you. Cemetery Tampering, cool hideaway card as well. Barrowgoyf, sweet new card, great in this deck. And Altar of Dementia. Altar of Dementia seems perfect because it's also a sacrifice outlet. You're going to have a lot of things going into your graveyard, so you're also going to have a lot of things coming out of your graveyard. There's certain cards that synergize when things leave your graveyard. We've got Sir Conrad the Grim to deal a bunch of damage. Tormod the Desecrator can make 2/2s. Thran Vigil can put +1/+1 counters on things. Skeleton Crew can also make 2/2s. And Desecrated Tomb, one of the best cards for this deck. It creates 1/1 black bats. Perfect. Speaking of bats, people are probably going to build this deck with a lot of bats in it because you can gain a ton of life if you have a deck full of bats and you're attacking with a bunch of bats. So let's talk about both bats and cards that make bat tokens. Both these categories are going to be very important if you want to go that life gain and bats matter route. Dirge Bat is removal on a bat. Grimclaw bats can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Waxwane Witness, whenever you gain or lose life during your turn, it gets +1/+0. So if you swing with a bunch of bats, this thing's going to get huge. Darkstar Augur, great card advantage engine here on a bat. Starlit Soothsayer, at the beginning of your end step, if you attack with a bat, you'll surveil one. Surveilling's perfect for this deck because you want stuff in your graveyard anyways. Life Creed Duo can essentially double up that life gain from Zoraline. Star Charter can give you some card advantage. Mirror Entity, technically a bat, and can make your creatures massive. Changeling Outcast is just an unblockable bat. Sturge seems perfect for this deck. It's a 1 mana bat that you can pay 2 mana and a life to sacrifice to draw a card. And then using Zoraline, you can replay it from your graveyard, and then you can remove the counter and then sacrifice it to draw a card and do that again and again. That seems fun. Starseer Mentor is a good way to just capitalize on that life gain. Screeching Scorch Beast, it's a giant bat that can help you mill and also pump out tokens. Mirkwood Bats, perfect with all the tokens. Moonrise Cleric, more life gain on a bat. Moonstone Harbinger seems great in this deck. Whenever you attack with bats, it can just grow all your bats by 1. Perfect. Rune Lurker Bat works well with the mill thing because you're going to be milling stuff, so at the end step you will have descended since you milled, and then you'll be able to scry. And it's also just a 1 mana 1/1 flying lifelink. Malakir Familiar is going to be a finisher in this deck, and you can get it back with Zoraline, since it's only 3 mana. Let's just say you have 5 bats in play and you attack with Malakir Familiar. Zoraline will trigger, you'll gain 5 life, 1 life 5 times, so Malakir Familiar will get +5/+5 until end of turn. That's a clock. Gurmag Swiftwing is just a efficient bat. Eye Twitch, this is a sacrificey deck. You can sacrifice Eye Twitch and learn. You can't use a lesson from your sideboard, however, if you don't have a sideboard, you can discard a card to draw a card so you can fill your graveyard while digging into your deck. Seems worth it. Courier Bat can help return stuff from your graveyard to your hand when you gain life. Basilica Screecher has Extort, so you can gain life off of every spell you cast and drain your opponents out. Deep Cavern Bat, perfect for this deck. And the Big Bat Aclazotz. Seems fun, I like the idea of throwing this in the deck. As for token creators, Regal Bloodlord, perfect. You're gaining life, you're going to make bat tokens. Maskwood Nexus can pump out bats and also make your non-bats into bats. Grave Shifter can return stuff from your graveyard to your hand. Blackmark Connections is both ramp, card draw, and bat creation. Birthing Bows can pump out bats. Skeletal Vampire, you can sack a bat to make 2 bats. Seems awesome in this. Sanguine Evangelist is 3 mana, so Zoraline can get it back, and when it ETBs or dies, you create a bat. And it has Battle Cry. So you can just keep attacking with this thing, or sacrificing this thing, and just creating bat tokens. And lastly, Bat Colony. If you want to throw a bunch of caves in this deck, Bat Colony can generate a bunch of bats. Zoraline triggers whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks. So, you can use blink effects, so that way you can get additional triggers. So you attack, get a trigger, then you blink it later, and then get another trigger, and so on and so forth. Just some extra triggers. Seems pretty good. Plus, blink and flicker effects work phenomenally in this deck, because if you bring something back with a finality counter on it, and you blink it, that finality counter goes away. Perfect. Great synergies here. Some of the cool blink cards you can toss in are Cloud Shift and Ephemerate, just 1 mana instant speed, seem great. Teleportation Circle and Conjurer's Closet are repeatable end-step blinks. Touch the Spirit Realm is nice because you can channel it to blink something, and then you can replay it from the graveyard with Zoraline. Perfect. The Eternal Wanderer lets you blink every turn. Belia, awesome in this deck. Gilrain is another repeatable way to blink things, plus you can give Vigilance and Lifelink to stuff. Flicker Form is cool, and you can bring that back from your graveyard as Zoraline. Semester's End, Lazelle's Acrobatics, Ghostway, and Eerie Interlude let you blink everything that you have, so you can get extra triggers off Zoraline and remove finality counters from things at the same time while getting extra ETBs if you have extra ETBs. Charming Prince, a creature that you can get back with Zoraline that has a blink effect on it. Another round, you can capitalize on all these ETBs. And Against All Odds. Seems perfect for the deck, lets you blink something, and lets you return something with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Super on theme for this deck. There's a lot of good cards that are 3 mana or less that you can bring back with Zoraline. I came up with a little list of some of the cards I like the best for this purpose. Let's talk about them. A lot of the cards I'll be talking about here have enters the battlefield triggers, and that's because you're going to run blink stuff anyways, so it seems really worth it. Liliana Standard Bearer's pretty cool in this deck, especially if you're leaning into a sacrifice theme, which I think is good in this deck. Lord Skitter's Butcher. It lets you either create a token, or you can sack another creature to scry to and draw a card, or give your creatures menace until end of turn. So I like the utility that this has. Stalking Leonin, being able to reset this when it dies, or if by blinking it, seems perfect. Skyclave Apparition is removal. Gumdrop Poisoner, another removal card. Lorn of the Third Path, artifact and enchantment removal. Grasp of Fate's great removal as well. Flicker Wisp can flicker any permanent, so it's really nice at removing finality counters or just getting extra ETBs. Extraction Specialist brings something back along with it. Callous Blood Mage, just high utility. Blade Splicer for token creation. Wernog Rider's Chaplain, great at creating card advantage while also draining your opponents. Wall of Omens can draw you a card. Tainted Adversary is pretty cool because if you have a ton of mana, you can get back Tainted Adversary and then pump mana into it to make tokens. Same thing with Intrepid Adversary. Orcish Bowmaster seems like a no-brainer. Then you have Necromancy and Animate Dead, so you can kind of reanimate whatever you want off of these permanents that can end up in your graveyard and you can just bring back with Zoraline. There's also a bunch of cards I want to mention that can put themselves into your graveyard so you can bring them back again and again and again and get a lot of extra value. Priest of Fell Rites, it can reanimate and bring things back while sending itself to the graveyard. Selfless Spirit is board protection. Expedition Map can get your nesting grounds, your Cabal coffers, whatever you may need. Solitary Confinement, you can just not pay, discard a card, flicker Zoraline, bring it back, seems perfect. Smoke Bomb is pretty cool in this deck because you can flash it out to protect something, and you can just keep it around as long as you want and sacrifice in your upkeep. Minimus Containment I think is an underrated removal piece in a deck like this. You can bring it back with Zoraline, and it will go to your graveyard once somebody sacrifices whatever it's enchanting using that thing as a treasure. Boromir, another way to protect your board. Seal of Cleansing, just more removal. Dauthi Voidwalker, great in this, you can steal your opponent's cards. Dauntless Dismantler, slows down your opponents and then can just blow a bunch of things up. Bounty Agent, this is commander removal, repeatably. Stone of Eric, it's graveyard hate while also drawing you a card. Static Prison, hits any non-land permanent for 1 mana. And you can keep it down for a couple turns because of the energy it gives you when it enters. And then when it does die, you just bring it back. Executioner's Capsule, repeatable removal. Ranger Captain of Eos can go and tutor out bats or whatever you need to get, while also being able to sacrifice itself to stop your opponents from casting non-creature spells. Accursed Marauder, perfect for this. And Cathar Commando. If you want to lean into the sacrifice theme and you want to go with some of the cards that can't just sacrifice themselves, there's a lot of great sack outlets that you can throw into this deck. Warren Soul Trader can make treasures. Victimize, I just love this card. You have Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar for mana generation. Braids, it's card advantage or making your opponent sacrifice stuff. Attrition, awesome sack outlet. It's also removal. Nasty End, Fanatical Offering, Eviscerator's Insight, and Deadly Dispute are all cool card draw engines. Diabolic Intent is just a tutor with a sacrifice outlet. Viscera Seer, of course. Dockside Chef is fun. Phyrexian Tower can generate mana. High Market to gain some life. Both Phyrexian Tower and High Market being on lands is nice, especially if you do run that expedition map. And lastly, Claws of Gix. Pay 1 mana, sack a permanent, you gain 1 life. So you can sack whatever you want with this. If you're going to go with that sacrifice theme, there's also a lot of sacrifice payoffs to mention. A lot of these are worth running anyways because you can have a lot of stuff in this deck that can self-sacrifice. Some of the cool payoffs are Zulaport Cutthroat to drain out your opponents, Skull Clamp for card draw, Pitiless Plunderer, make a bunch of treasures, Pawn of Ulamog can give you more sack fodder, Dark Prophecy is card draw, Blight Mound, create a bunch of pests, Bastion of Remembrance, more draining, Grave Path to make your opponent sacrifice their whole board, and Merchant of Truth. This one's pretty fun because you can attack with Zoraline for a lot more damage if you make a bunch of clues. You're going to probably gain a lot of life with this deck. I mean, you're going to be attacking with bats and stuff, so let's talk about the life gain payoffs. There's a bunch of good payoffs to mention. Ocelot Pride can help with that token generation. Witch of the Moor is a good way to get stuff back from your graveyard. Same thing with Vane Witch Coven. The Gaffer is nice card draw. Resplendent Angel can pump out tokens. Krav and Regna. Regna makes tokens and Krav is a sacrifice outlet that can gain you more life and get big. Griffin Airy, more flying token creation. Crested Sunmare, one of my favorite life gain cards, can make a bunch of indestructible horses. Celestine can help bring stuff back from your graveyard. Well of Lost Dreams is a decent card draw engine. Veto, drain out your opponents. Rudolph Duskbringer, another way to bring stuff back from your graveyard. Righteous Valkyrie, you can make your stuff even bigger. Marauding Blight Priest, awesome in this deck. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. You're going to be attacking with a bunch of bats. Those are individual life gain triggers, so you can drain out your opponents pretty quickly. Karlov, great removal card here that can get terrifyingly big. Heliod can grow your board. Alenda's Hierophant can get very big, and then when it dies or you sacrifice it, you make a bunch of 1/1s. Cliffhaven Vampire, already mentioned stuff like this. Archangel Athune, this can grow your bats into an insane size. And Amalia, exploring seems awesome in this deck. It's just good card advantage. If you're going to run a bunch of life gain payoffs, you could also run some more life gain enablers. Kimball, Profiteering Mayor, perfect for this deck, especially when you're making tokens. Case of the Uneaten Feast, gains you life and then lets you play stuff from your graveyard. Sorin of House Markov, great card here. Extort, flips into a good walker. You have Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant, the Soul Sisters, perfect. Children of the Apocalypse can gain you life whenever you draw a card. Path of Bravery makes your stuff a lot bigger and acts as an additional Zoraline attack trigger. Kimball, Council of Allocation, another way to just drain out your opponents. Authority of the Consuls, taps down your opponent's stuff while you're gaining life. And a Johnny's Welcome, just some more life gain. And lastly, let's talk about some one-off cards, because there's a bunch of good cards that didn't fit into the other categories that I mentioned, but are definitely worth mentioning. Sun Titan, no reason to not run it in this deck, just acts as another Zoraline. Rally of Ancestors, Rally seems perfect. Lively Dirge can get stuff into your graveyard and also reanimate stuff for you. Guardian Scale Lord, just another Sun Titan-esque effect. Battle of Hoover Dam lets you get stuff back at your end step. Andoril can make your bats pretty big. Starlit Sanctum, this just seems good inside the deck. I talked about a lot of clerics, and it's just high upside, low floor. Chthonian Nightmare is perfect. You can get it back with Zoraline if you mill it, and it can help you cycle things in and out of your graveyard. Speaking of cycling, this seems like an awesome cycling deck with Astral Drift or Astral Slide. If you cycle a card, you get to blink something, and you're going to have a lot of ETB stuff, so you can get those extra ETBs. It'll also remove the finality counters, and whatever you cycle goes to the graveyard, so you can then get that back with Zoraline. There's just such a good cycling synergy, especially if you have Drift or Slide in play. I really like this card as a cycling commander. And then we have a couple of bat payoffs like Valley Rock Caller and Valley Quest Caller. That is everything I had to talk about with Zoraline. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Peace out, everybody.